they're proving a lot more intangible, entangled and difficult to solve than he anticipated. And he surrounded himself by a very inexperienced team who aren't really properly staffed or able to engage in complex negotiations whose roots are often centuries long. And, it's catching up with him.
We can speak now to Lord Malloch Brown, Mark Malloch Brown, the former Deputy Secretary General of the UN. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
A trip to the Middle East for Donald Trump, no visit to Netanyahu in Israel. Do we read anything into that?
I think we do. It's very strange. Biden spent 4 years emulating Trump's policy of the first term of really cozying up to Netanyahu. And in some ways, it's taken Trump to break with Trump. Now, we shouldn't overdo it because he still allowed the extraordinary potential clearances of Gaza, which, a military operation which is anticipated to pick up once Trump leaves the region. So in terms of some key critical issues, he remains very aligned with Netanyahu. But the release of this hostage yesterday was done with very little engagement, it seems, with the Israelis. The reach out to Iran, which is an absolute red line for Netanyahu, was again done despite the Israelis. And similarly, all of this trip, this focus on these three Gulf states, and it's not including a stop in Israel, reflects that the key policy of the first term, which was a rapprochement politically, the so-called Abraham Accords between Israel and its Gulf neighbors, that Trump has recognized that with the continuing conflict in Gaza, that has to stay on the sidelines for now, and he has to pursue a strengthened bilateral policy or engagement between the US and these three states and leave Israel on the side.
He's just come out of his plane, actually, Donald Trump in Riyadh, fist pumping and going down the purple carpet where he's going to be met with an honor guard. Is he temperamentally quite inclined towards Arab nations, I wonder? Like places like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, they're kind of awash with money, slightly garishly awash with money. They like deals. They see the world as a place where they can spend their money and make it prosper. There's something that feels that connects them with Trump at some level.
Well, I'm sure he'll spend a lot of this trip observing that it's like Mar-a-Lago on the Red Sea. There is a common design style running through his own preferences and what he's now doing to the Oval Office, where, he proudly shows the visitors the addition of the new gold leaf, etc. But I think, there's something even more ironic and profounder at play, which is that, when Trump first went to Saudi Arabia at the beginning of his first term, and then subsequently, as you mentioned, Stig, the Khashoggi killing meant that, Saudi Arabia was really in the international doghouse. And now suddenly, MBS, the ruler of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, has really done an extraordinary job in rehabilitating himself and being seen almost as a statesman, a host to Ukraine peace talks, at the center of a lot of regional peace initiatives. And the sort of rogue state, strangely, is Trump 4 months into his new term, where, in a sense, the one who the international community is now suspicious of is America's president, not Saudi Arabia's crown prince.
And the two of them are walking together down the purple carpet as we speak. Just before you go, Mark, Trump creates we're trying to work this out yesterday, and it's probably going to be a question we'll be asking and trying to answer over the course of the next few weeks. Trump creates a lot of sound and fury on the global stage, and the question of does it signify nothing or something? Does he ever actually achieve anything? Gaza, still a humanitarian disaster. Ukraine and Russia not really close to peace. He's saying he might drop in on talks between Zelensky and Putin, but if Putin may not even show up to Istanbul to have conversation with Zelensky, and if they did, they probably wouldn't agree about very much. Is he moving things to any good effect, do you think, Donald Trump?
Well, again, if you look at his first term, both the Abraham Accords and the dramatic pivot against China were lasting changes in American foreign policy. But, the volume of noise and excitement around the much wider agenda of peace with North Korea, of removing Iran's nuclear capability, etc., 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 was just that noise and excitement that led nowhere. And I think we all anticipated that, the early awe and fear, the fast-moving Trump too in these first months when he'd sort of come back from his Napoleon-like exile and had planned this time for a much more coherent, attack on policy problems, was going to lead to a better ratio between results and sound and fury, even if we didn't like the results. But in fact, you're right, Stig, I think. We are seeing the thing banging up against a wall. In the Middle East as much as anywhere. I think he hoped this would be a political visit to the Middle East with lots of diplomatic successes. Instead, it's pivoted to a commercial visit, and very much, I suspect, around his own family interests in many ways. Yeah. And that is a measure less of his own preference and more of his failure on the political front to in any substantial way live up to his campaign promise that he was going to end wars, solve the world's conflicts overnight. They're proving a lot more intangible, entangled and difficult to solve than he anticipated. And he surrounded himself by a very inexperienced team who aren't really properly staffed or able to engage in complex negotiations whose roots are often centuries long. And, it's catching up with him.
Yeah, easy to do the flash of a deal rather than something more substantive. Mark, really interesting stuff. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Stig.
That's Lord Malloch Brown there, the former Deputy Secretary General of the UN.